Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. Today we are taking a close look at the Roland Aerophone BRISA, a digital wind instrument especially interesting for flute players. This review will be in English, but I will share my final thoughts in English, French and Italian. Bonjour à toutes et à tous, aujourd'hui je vais vous présenter le Roland Aerophone BRISA. La review sera en anglais, mais à la fin de la vidéo je partagerai mes conclusions également en français e in italiano. Ciao a tutti, oggi in questo video parliamo del Roland Aerophone BRISA, uno strumento digitale davvero particolare, soprattutto dal punto di vista di un flautista. La recensione sarà in inglese, ma alla fine troverete le mie considerazioni finali anche in italiano e in francese. So, what exactly is the Roland Aerophone BRISA? The easiest way to describe it is probably as an electric flute, or more precisely, a digital wind instrument designed around the shape and key layout of a traditional transverse flute. As you can see, it really looks and feels like a flute in terms of its horizontal design and playing position. But unlike a traditional flute, it doesn't come apart into the usual head joint, body and foot joint sections. The lip plate is fixed to the instrument, although the angle of the head joint can be adjusted to find a more comfortable playing position. Inside, the BRISA uses Roland's supernatural winds sound engine. It comes with 100 preset sounds, including different kinds of flutes, saxophone, clarinets, trumpets, ethnic instruments, synthesizers, drums and more. You can also store 48 user tones, and there are 17 different effect types available on board. It has a small built-in speaker, useful for practicing or quickly checking a sound, but personally I would not use it to judge the actual sound quality of the instrument. Fortunately, there is also a stereo headphone output. The BRISA also has a rechargeable internal battery. You charge it through USB-C, and Roland specifies approximately 8 hours of continuous use on a full charge. The USB-C connection can also carry both audio and MIDI to a computer or a mobile device. There is also Bluetooth, MIDI, a small OLED display, a motion sensor and several different fingering modes. There is also a dedicated BRISA Plus app for editing parameters, managing favorite sounds and accessing additional sounds through Roland Cloud. But I want to make one thing clear from the beginning: this is not going to be a highly technical review. So if you are looking for detailed specifications, MIDI implementation, connectivity options, or complete list of functions, you can find all of that on Roland official website. I am a flute player, so I will mainly look at the BRISA from a flutist's point of view. What I really want to know is how does this instrument actually feel to a flute player and how good does it sound. Now I tell you something important. I have been a professional flute player for almost 30 years. So in this review I'm using the flute fingering mode. And this is probably one of the things I love most about the BRISA. The fingering is the same as on a traditional transverse flute. And for me, that's a big deal. Over the years, I have tried several electronic wind instruments, but this is the first one that really gives me the feeling of using actual flute fingerings. You don't have to learn a completely different fingering system. If you already play the flute, your fingers immediately recognize where they have to go, and that's fantastic. The keys also respond very well. They feel precise and reliable. The only thing I notice is that compared to a traditional flute, I personally need to press them a little more firmly. Not much, but enough to notice the difference. Now, despite all this, I wouldn't say that the BRISA is immediately easy to play. The fingering itself is not the problem. The real challenge is the octave change. And this is probably the part that requires the most adaptation for a flute player. So let's talk about octave changes. This is probably the most unusual part of the brisa, at least if you are coming from a traditional flute. The mouthpiece has two separate breath holes. When you are using flute fingering mode, the brisa uses these two holes to detect which register you want to play. Roland calls this a dual breath sensor system. With the default natural setting, the logic is very simple. If you blow mainly into the upper hole, the brisa plays one octave higher. If you blow into both holes, it stays in the basic octave. If you direct the air into the lower hole, the brisa plays lower octave. So the octave change doesn't really depend on blowing harder. It depends much more on where you direct the air. And this takes some practice. At first, you find it quite difficult to make the octave changes consistent. But the good news is that Roland lets you adjust the response. Inside the Flute Harmonics settings, you can change the sensitivity of the octave control with Harmonics Center, and you can also change how quickly the brisa reacts with Harmonics delay. Roland specifically recommends moving the center towards lower if the upper register is difficult to trigger, and reducing the delay if octave change feels too slow. In my case, the factory settings were center mid, delay 5. I changed them to center lower 2, delay 3, and for me this made a big difference. The octave changes became much easier and much more predictable. So, if you are a flute player and you try the brisa for the first time and think, wow, changing octaves is really difficult, don't give up immediately. Spend some time adjusting these settings because they can really change the playing experience. Now let's talk about the sounds. The brisa comes with 100 onboard tones covering several different families, flute sounds, other wind instruments such as saxophone, clarinet, trumpet, orchestral strings, word instruments, as well as synthesizers and drum sounds. I am going to play just a few examples now to give you an idea of the overall sound quality. So what do I think about the Roland BRISA? Overall, I think it's a very interesting and innovative instrument. I like it very much. But there is one thing I think flute players should understand before buying it. If you are a classical flutist looking for an instrument that allows you to put on a pair of headphones and practice your classical repertoire without disturbing anyone, I would be a little careful. The octave mechanism is quite different from an acoustic flute, and in my opinion, the classical flute sounds are not the strongest part of the BRISA. Personally, I don't see this instrument as a replacement for the traditional transverse flute. I see it almost as a completely different instrument, and that's actually where I think the BRISA becomes really interesting. If you are a flute player who wants to discover new sounds, explore electronic textures, experiment with effects, or have a flute-shaped instrument with MIDI connectivity, then the BRISA opens up a lot of possibilities. For me, that's its real strength. I'm not trying to replace my flute, it's giving me another instrument to play. And personally, that's exactly how I intend to use it. Alors, qu'est-ce que je pense du Roland BRISA? Eh bien, globalement, je trouve que c'est un instrument très intéressant et innovant, je l'aime beaucoup. Il y a quand même une chose importante à savoir, surtout si vous êtes flûtiste. Eh bien, si vous êtes flûtiste classique et que vous cherchez simplement un instrument permettant de mettre un casque et de travailler votre répertoire classique sans déranger personne, eh bien, alors là, je serai un peu prudent. Le système de changement d'octave est en effet assez différent de celui d'une flûte acoustique et à mon avis, les sons de flûte classique ne sont pas le point fort du BRISA. Personnellement, je ne considère donc pas cet instrument comme un substitut à la flûte traversière traditionnelle, je le considère presque comme un autre instrument. Et c'est justement là qu'il devient, selon moi, vraiment intéressant. Bah, du coup, si vous êtes flûtiste et que vous avez envie de découvrir de nouvelles sonorités, d'explorer les sons électroniques, d'utiliser des effets ou d'avoir un instrument avec une véritable ergonomie de flûte avec une connexion MIDI, et bah, le BRISA offre énormément de possibilités. Pour moi, c'est là sa véritable force. Il ne remplace pas ma flûte, il me donne simplement un nouvel instrument à jouer. Quindi cosa penso del Roland BRISA? Allora, nel complesso secondo me è uno strumento molto interessante e innovativo, mi piace molto. C'è però una cosa che credo sia molto importante da chiarire: se siete flautisti classici e state pensando di acquistarlo semplicemente per mettere le cuffie e studiare il vostro repertorio classico senza disturbare nessuno, ecco allora fare un po' di attenzione prima di comprarlo. Innanzitutto perché il meccanismo del cambio di ottava non ha veramente nulla a che vedere con quello del nostro flauto traverso classico e inoltre i suoni di flauto classico non sono di certo il punto di forza di questo strumento. Personalmente quindi non considero il BRISA un sostituto del flauto traverso tradizionale, diciamo così, ma lo considero invece quasi come se fosse un altro strumento ed è proprio qui secondo me che allora diventa davvero interessante. Se siete flautisti e volete scoprire nuove sonorità, esplorare suoni elettronici, sperimentare con gli effetti oppure avere uno strumento che ha la diteggiatura del flauto e la connessione MIDI, ecco allora il BRISA apre moltissime possibilità. Per me questo è il suo vero punto di forza, non sostituisce il flauto, ma dà semplicemente un altro strumento da suonare con le diteggiature del flauto. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think about the Roland BRISA and if you have any questions about it. See you in the next video. Bye! Eh bien, merci beaucoup d'avoir regardé cette vidéo. Dites-moi dans les commentaires ce que vous pensez du Roland BRISA et si vous avez des questions. Et je vous dis à bientôt dans une prochaine vidéo. Grazie mille per aver visto questo video. Fatemi sapere nei commenti cosa ne pensate del Roland BRISA e se avete qualche domanda. Io vi saluto e ci vediamo nel prossimo video. Ciao!